The next 290 days will make you a millionaire. It seems impossible because who is going to pay you that much money in such a short period of time? But what if I told you that you have already missed multiple opportunities that could have made you a millionaire over the last 290 days? I can literally list 10, 20, 30, maybe even 50 opportunities that you have already missed. But the great news is that there are going to be much more opportunities in the next 290 days. In fact, I'll tell you more than that. We're actually entering a phase or a stage within the economic cycle that makes it much easier to make a lot of money. And here in this video, I'm gonna prove that for you. I'm not just throwing some random words. I will just show you the facts, I will show you the numbers, I will show you the graphs, and you can come to the same conclusions that I did. So if you're ready, give this video a thumbs up and let's get right into it. If you look at the graph of the S&P 500 over the last 8 to 9 years, you will see a very great pattern. The reason I'm using the S&P 500 is because it represents the top 500 largest companies in the United States. And if you look at any of those companies individually, you will see pretty much the exact same pattern. So the S&P 500 simply reflects how most of these companies are performing consistently. We are talking about Apple, Amazon, Tesla, you name it. And if you just go to 2020, there was a chaos when the stock market collapsed dramatically over here. And you remember back in the days when people were afraid to invest, but of course the government was very swift and they immediately took actions that started growing the economy. And after that, we had a lot of growth. So during the chaos, whoever jumped in and bought the stocks when everybody was afraid to buy, these are the people who benefited the most out of this opportunity. Some people did it a bit later after that when they realized that in fact, the government is actually coming to help everybody else. In fact, the government is ready to print that much money in order to rescue the economy. But the sooner people who could actually navigate through this entire chaos, the more money they've actually made. And over the last couple of years, there was consistent growth. From 2020 to 2022, everybody who wasn't lazy made money, whether it was the stock market or it was crypto, you name it, or even real estate. People who actually took mortgages and bought houses in 2020 and 2021 made some of the best investing decisions of their lifetime because they locked in mortgages at 2, 3, or maybe even 4% in some cases for 30 years. And in fact, they purchased houses that now worth at least 20, 30, or in some cases even 50% more. But here's where you have to pay a lot of attention to. In 2020, something fundamentally happens over here, and the next year is a complete chaos in the market. All the gains that have been made during the pandemic suddenly went down, and the market went as far as it was like back in 2019 or around that period. What happened over here? We had massive inflation, we had war in Europe, and that chaos lasted for over a year. In fact, it lasted up until recently. And during that chaos, the people who could navigate through that chaos, the people who were not afraid to invest during that chaos, the people who could see opportunities within that chaos, they jumped in and started buying stocks. Yes, the S&P 500 overall did not fall that much, but if you go into the S&P 500 and you look into some of the stocks such as Netflix or Facebook, or it's known probably today as Meta, you'll find out that they have dipped so much, and if you bought them at their dip, you would have made 100, 200, in some cases 300%. Even Nvidia back in the days wasn't such a big deal like it's today. We were in the early days of artificial intelligence. And that is what you have to understand. Whenever there is chaos, that is your opportunity to jump in and invest in the right stocks. Because right after the chaos that happened in 2022 and 2023, there is another growth that happened. And the people who invested during the chaos over this period are the people who have profited after that and are locking huge profits right now. Do you see a pattern that consistently follows to the entire stock market? Now, some people might say, well, that have been the case over the last 4 to 5 years, but you cannot reliably trust this pattern. I would say let's take a look at the data and see if it actually matches. Back in the 1990s, we had the dot-com revolution when every internet company you know today probably emerged. We are talking about Amazon, we are talking about I don't even know what kind of companies, but most of the companies that you know today, even Yahoo is no longer such a tech giant like it was back in the days, but even Google emerged back in 1990s. Every company that put at the end of its name .com literally boosted their stock prices, and every company wanted to profit out of it. At the end of the day, we humans are very greedy creatures, and we wanted to make much more money than it's possible out of this technology, and we turned this technology into a stock market bubble that then crushed and everybody lost after it. And you can clearly see that in the graph of the S&P 500. It was a chaos back in the early days of the internet, but people who invested profited out of it. But then we have after that a period of chaos that happens because everybody was confused. What exactly has happened? How on earth those companies that we knew are going to change the entire course of human history have suddenly collapsed? Those people did not understand that even if you come up with the best technology in the world, it cannot suddenly change everything. It will take time for that technology to adapt. It will take time for that change to change the world overall. So think of Amazon. It came out back in the late 1990s or probably early 1990s. It's today that have changed the world. Today, it's one of the largest companies in the world. Google came out back in the late 1990s. Today, it's a giant that's worth over $2 trillion, probably even closer to $3 trillion. However, investors get greedy again and they're looking for opportunities after that. Now, most people were afraid to invest back in this period because the market was down and everybody was afraid. But then suddenly, the people who made the right bets on the housing market before it started growing tremendously made a lot of money. And we can categorize these companies into two types because one group of these financial institutions were so greedy that they ended up crushing the entire housing market in the United States, and as a result of that, a lot of these companies went bankrupt. But on the other side, we have a long list of people and companies and businesses who made pretty much a lot of money out of it. Again, the trend continues and we have another crisis right after that. The 2008 financial crisis happens and then the economy goes into another period of chaos when everybody is afraid. This is when people like Warren Buffett jumped in and started buying a lot of assets. This is the opportunity that made Warren Buffett the richest person in the world. He wasn't afraid. He made some of the best deals in his entire life. He actually started investing in companies that nobody thought that he would. He spent billions of dollars on Wells Fargo. He bailed General Motors. He even bailed General Electric. And Warren Buffett was literally the guy who was saving those corporations. Of course, he wasn't actually saving them just because he's such a good person. He made billions of dollars. In some cases, he made like 100, 200, or even 300% on some of these investments. After the period of chaos, the really great investors, the really smart investors, they weren't afraid to look for opportunities and they started investing. And right after that, there is another period of growth, and the investors who invested back in this period made a lot of money after that. And that's because the economy works in cycle. It's not like literally just a straight line. There are sometimes booms and then there's sometimes depressions or recessions. So it goes dramatically up and then it collapses. And then it soars again and it collapses. As a smart investor, you are there for the long term. You're not afraid of this chaos that happens within the entire market because you have mastered the foundations of the stock market. You have a really good, solid investing strategy and you're not afraid. Whenever there is a bubble, maybe you might actually sell right before everything crashes. That's if you are a really great and smart investor. And then you're going to buy a lot of those companies when everything has actually crashed and there is a lot of chaos. So the question remains is that at what stage are we particularly are right now within the entire economy? And if you can answer this question, then you can actually be confident about your investing decisions because you know what is going to happen next. It's very difficult to actually make that conclusion right now because it's very difficult to trust yourself when you don't know the future. Nobody knows the future. But really great investors, they're not talking about the future. They simply know how the system works and they trust the system and they make their investing decisions during a system. And even if you go like 100, 200, 300 or 500 years ago, there was a very beautiful saying, buy when there is blood in the streets. Buy when there is chaos. buy when there is crisis. And if you look at the news right now, you see all these stocks are crashing and some people claiming that we might enter a recession. And they might be right, and that's absolutely fine if we might actually get into a recession. But all of that chaos presents a very unique opportunity for you to invest right now so that 6 months from now, a year from now, 2 years from now, you will reap the rewards of the investments that you have made right now. Of course, you shouldn't just go randomly buy stocks. Make sure that you absolutely know what you are doing. Donald Trump right now is trying to change the entire rules of the global trade that we have set in place since 1990s. Now, a lot of people are freaking out that we have all of these tariffs that Trump is putting and is changing everything. Let me tell you something. There have already been a period in the history of the United States where there were a lot of tariffs. And I'm not talking about pre-1945 era. I'm talking about 1990s. I'm talking about 1980s. Like back in 1990s, before they introduced NAFTA, there were tariffs between Mexico, the United States, and Canada, and the European Union. And they created this trade agreement between North American countries. They've also created the World Trade Organization in order to make sure that we reduce tariffs as much as possible. But the United States started losing this trade against the rest of the world, and it's running a $1 trillion deficit. And right now they are trying to change that, because if they do not change that, if you actually continue that deficit for the next decade or so, the US is going to be out of business, which is why they're trying to literally put all of these tariffs, force the rest of the world to come to a table and agree on new rules of trade to make sure that the United States is no longer going to run this $1 trillion deficit and will not go out of business in the next 10 or 20 or 30 years. And all of these changes can be categorized in one single word: chaos. Because we don't know what are going to be the final rules. We don't know what is going to be the state of the economy at the end of this chaos. But what we know historically is that at the end of the chaos, when we have agreed on the rules, when we have understood how everything is going to grow after that, there is going to be growth. Because the state of the US economy, or the foundation of the US economy, are very solid, are very strong. The US has the largest corporations in the world. The AI revolution is happening in the United States. The world's largest technology companies are in the US. So if you're looking to make millions of dollars, if you're looking to grow your investments by 100, 200, 300%, now is the time to actually get into the market, find out those investments.